The response to Bryan Harsin's comments at SEC Media Days seemed to be unanimous, but let's discuss one angle that no one's talking about.
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Towards the end of today's show, we will be joined by ESPN and SEC Network's own Peter Burns. But first things first, happy Charlie Tuesday to all of you out there who celebrate this special day of the week. We didn't get to celebrate it last week because of SEC Media Days, but thank you for being patient. And here we go again, brother.
I'm excited. Media Days was great. You did an awesome job. The content you were pumping out was absolutely incredible. I mean, like the interviews you got were unreal. The sound bites you got with Harsin, Joe Tessitore, all the dudes. Way to go. Big wins for Locked On Auburn. This dude works hard.
I appreciate that. But I missed you a ton last week.
Missed you too. Missed everybody.
So we were talking beforehand. Bryan Harsin, his words at SC Media Days pretty much across the board, like, wow, this guy came out swinging. Wow, super impressive. Excited a lot of the fan base. Got me excited.
Sure.
Got me excited for sure. You are coming at this from a different angle than a lot of people, and I think it's what we're talking about.
Sure. So I also, as a fan, it's hard not to love it. You know, it's sort of like a punch back at the man type situation, a stand your ground. Love that. Love every single bit about that. Love the strong will. Love the competitive fire that he's like, hey, you know what? My message to recruits: watch. Basically, in other words, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. Love all that. I don't, and then what I'm about to say is not. I'm not saying that I think it's a bad thing, but I think it's something that's worth talking about. Yes. You know, there's a way things have been done at Auburn for a very long time, and you know, there's certain people that they have names on buildings. They're on the hook for buyouts. They help fund contracts. They help fund building projects, stadium renovations, things like that. And a lot of those guys were a part of the whole February issues. Okay. The headbutting, what if you want to call it a coup, whatever you want to call it. So my question is how much concern is there that instead of and you know, this could have been something that was talked about beforehand and said, hey, I'm going to say this, but you know, I don't really mean it or whatever. I don't know. Could have been that, but on the surface, it looks like I'm doubling down. I don't need you guys. And a lot of those dudes write the checks that keep this football program going. So how bold of a move is that? Is it a smart one? Is it one that's could benefit Auburn in the future? What are your thoughts on that? Because that was the first thing I thought of. You know, I'm in sales, so I have customers that I call on and whatnot, and you know, I have the ability to say I don't want to sell to you anymore. But you know what I got to do? I got to find a replacement. I got to keep that going. So, what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that perspective?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to say that I'm not going to say 100%, but a very large part of Bryan Harsin's comments this past Thursday were in reference to power and control. Yes. And I think Bryan Harsin is letting the fan base know that, one, the powers that be are not making his job easy, and two, that he's tired of it. And he's going to win it all regardless, but he is going to earn the trust of the fan base and help kind of win the social battle of all of this to get more and more control over this football program. That was a big part of the conversations at SEC Media Days with folks that cover other markets, that they wanted to ask my thoughts of like, what's the power structure there right now? Because what happened in February sadly became a national story, and it had everything to do with control and power. Yeah. Yes. And the rich dudes versus Bryan Harsin is really what it felt like.
Few rich dudes, few top heavy rich
right.
dudes, basically. So that
You're right.
the power power structure is always seems to be an issue at Auburn because it's so top heavy. You know what I mean? Like as
When
far
I
as people that
first
go ahead.
when I first got into radio, talk radio in Auburn, I remember getting calls. This was during the early Gus Malzahn era. I was getting calls from, fanatics, the reason we call them fans, but folks calling in saying, are boosters calling the plays for Gus Malzahn, which is obviously ridiculous.
Right.
But the fact that boosters probably were in more meetings than they should have been with Gus Malzahn, I think is super interesting to look back on.
Oh, yeah.
And I just don't think Bryan Harsin is going to let that happen. And so obviously I think that's where part of the divide is. And so I think the average Auburn fan is on Bryan Harsin's side of all of this.
I agree.
Yeah. And so
I am too. I'm on the side.
Yeah. I mean, I think 99% of the Auburn fan base realizes like, oh yeah, the football coach should coach. The football coach at the college level should have control over what his roster looks like and what type of scheme you run. All that should go through the football coach. And so I think what he did Thursday was a prime opportunity that he took advantage of. Really the best opportunity he's had since all the February stuff happened was saying, hey, Auburn people and recruits, I'm fighting this.
I
want control of this program. Yep.
Yeah. And I'll take it even a step further. It does always seem like Auburn can have quick success after a coaching change. It seems like it's the nature of when you have a coaching change. And a lot of times I think that's because they hire guys that they think will do the things they say. And that works great early. That works great early. I'll give you whatever you need. You do what I say. We're in that honeymoon stage. We're friendly. But then once that wears off and, you lose a game you shouldn't lose or whatever, you've already set the standard of, I'm going to continue to cater to you. So, when your demands start to increase or they become more detrimental in my view of how I want to run the program, things become volatile, things become toxic. You fire coaches you don't want to fire. You do things that aren't really in your character. So, although I think I guess I've always looked at it like if you want to come to Auburn, you got to play the game. Bryan Harsin may be setting the standard, and if it works, you got to understand that this is a sidebar. When you try to use another example, it doesn't mean you're comparing them to somebody. A lot of times people say that when they just don't want to have a discussion. So when Nick Saban came to Alabama, it was a very similar structure as what Auburn had, just a little bit bigger. They kept rotating coaches because they would have early success because they tried to do things the Bear way. And then Saban came in and said, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to do things the way I want to do. You're not going to be involved. Yeah. You can either get on board or not, or I'm going to go find some people that will. And I think that second piece has taken Harsin a little bit longer to find those people, but I think he's starting to find them. You're seeing it with the off the field staff that he's building, all this, support that he's starting to see from these new NIL groups, things like that. I think Harsin's trying to point Auburn into a direction, and it could crash and burn. But if it were to succeed, it could set a precedent moving forward that could really, really change the trajectory of what Auburn football wants to be and how it achieves those goals. Like it could really change the trajectory of this whole program.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about a program changing stand. I think we're in the middle of it because honestly, either way, I think it's going to impact Auburn moving forward because I think he's either going to stand against it and win both off the field and also on the field. And Auburn's going to celebrate and they're going to overachieve in 2022 and everything will be great moving forward. Hopefully it helps your recruiting, Hopefully it helps, the backing of the fan base and NIL revenue and all of that. Or he's in the midst of a stand, goes 5-7, underachieves, and the powers that be can let him go because the fan base will be like, yeah, winning, losing record 2 years in a row. That's not acceptable.
Ideal.
Right.
It's not.
And then I think all of a sudden you're in a situation where it's like, man, it's starting to get scary. Like, because if you miss on this next coach, you're so far behind Bama, Georgia, and then these other powers in the SEC West that have kind of ascended. So either way, I do think we're in the middle of a program changing stand here.
Yeah, I think it could be in both ways. This could be great, or it could be where we never see another hire like this again. It could be where this is an I told you so. We go hire a Will Muschamp or a Charles Kelly or somebody that they feel comfortable with that's going to be a yes man. We'll probably have quick success, and then we'll rotate every 5 or 6 years. That's just the way that Auburn seems to always be. And that's why the more I really sleep on this, the more I really think about some of the things that Harsin does and says. Roster management is the only piece that I feel like that he's missing. That's the only piece. And I'm really anxious. I'm really hoping that part gets figured out, whether it be through the portal, through, depth chart management, moving forward, signing guys at positions of need, stuff like that, because everything else, culture, buy-in, being able to weed out who doesn't need to be a part of the program, which for good or for better, for worse,
sure.
And not making what's it called? Not bending the knee or not making concessions to what he wants.
Yeah.
Love all that. I mean, that's just something that I don't think we've seen in a very long time.
No, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. All right, you mentioned some of the groups that may be rising up around him. NIL, there's a new NIL group for Auburn launching this week. We'll talk about that and what we think that means for the program moving forward in just a moment. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. They sent us some new Built Puffs, 2 different flavors. One was the s'mores Built Puffs, and one was the... what was it? Chocolate? No, it was, dang it. It was cookie dough chunk puffs, which both of those sound delicious. I had the s'mores one of the best ones I've ever had. I'm probably going to buy a full box. And when I do that, I'm going to go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. That is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off. That is at built.com. All right, Charlie 5.
Well, first of all, cookie dough chunks. Is that what you said?
Yeah. It's like wrapped in like a delicious marshmallowy structure wrapped with chocolate. It's great. It's so good.
A marshmallowy vessel, a marshmallowy delivery vessel. Let's just go with that.
I think that's it. I think that's actually what it says in the copy here.
That's amazing.
All right, so there is a new NIL group that is formed.
Yes. New, old.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear. So on to Victory, they have bought out NILAU. It's going to function a lot of the same way. I think that we saw last year on signing day how powerful NIL could be. I think that we saw how powerful some of the transfers that we landed in the portal that are going to be very impactful. Probably start a little bit next year. How powerful it could be. Now, regardless of how NILAU ended, this new group has come in. They are going to launch a fan initiative. They're going to launch full bore this coming Friday, July 28th. It's no coincidence that that's right before Big Cat Weekend. So it's more guys. It's more people that are involved. And these guys make no bones about it. They're not in this to make money. They're in this to make Auburn competitive. They're in this to help change kids' lives that are a part of Auburn. They're in this thing, what's on paper, what seems like for all the right reasons. Not that the previous group was not. But, there was a lot of concerns about some of the overhead and whatnot. They're going to run as low overhead as possible, trying to get as many dollars into the pockets of the players for exchange, or I'm sorry, you got the talent for their, in exchange for their services as possible. And I think for a while, NIL has been sort of up in the air since definitely since, we had all the controversy in February, but
does this strike you as being different than the first wave that we saw of this for Auburn?
I think it strikes me as
there's a lower cost point, right?
Sure. Yes, there should be lower cost points, which is going to get more people involved, which will allow the average person to get involved. $250 was just, for some people that's a car payment. You know what I mean?
A month, yeah, that adds up quick.
$250 a month. I think you're going to see more. Maybe $25, $50 a month range, which should be able to make more people feel attached or involved. And I think that's going to be huge. And they're still going to have to go get the big money from the big money donors and things like that. But I know a couple of these guys personally, and they love Auburn. They want so badly for Auburn to win, to succeed. And I really do think these guys are going to be able to surround themselves with people that want to be involved with them a lot better. You asked a question, someone asked in the Discord, how is this going to be better or different? And I don't think those two words are correct words to ask, because I don't think that NILAU was necessarily bad per se. It was not sustainable. I think this new one is going to be set up to be sustainable. So we started something with NILAU. They couldn't finish it. This group is ready to pick it up, and they have a plan put in place to make it be effective and last, be sustainable. And I think sustainable is the key word, because there was a lot of success. You and I both know. We sat in there. We saw, the conversations. We know what was done, and we know how big of an impact it had on signing day. It just wasn't sustainable. And I think this one is going to be able to plant roots and grow. And some of the things they're talking about, I think you're going to see some of the athletes. You're going to be surprised at some of the people they've already signed. I can't say any names currently, but you're going to be happy with the path that they're already on. And we should start seeing that hit, over the weekend and over Big Cat weekend. And like I said, it's not a coincidence you're starting to see recruiting pick up. It's just not. You're starting to see names. We're probably going to have 2 2023 commits by the end of this week, by the end of this weekend, over the weekend. Probably 2 2024 commits over the weekend. And the 2024 list may be more impressive than the 2023 list that's coming in to visit this weekend. Like, the 2024 list is absolutely slammed. 2 quarterbacks, two very, very talented quarterbacks, some defensive backs, defensive linemen, offensive linemen. It's no coincidence that all of this is starting to happen as ownership has started to change. Words getting out, they're picking up. And when they launch this fan initiative on Friday, I think it's just going to go, like Gus used to say, how are we going? I think we're going to be doing, what a cruel example of what I'm talking about, but I think that's
I don't know if I would have gone there, but that's fine. I would have gone more with like what Coach Harsin said this past week. Watch.
Yeah, watch. Exactly.
It was right there. But you went with the old coach. What's going on, Charlie?
I don't know. I was going for the laugh.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good. Always for the laughter. All right. Hey, in just a moment, we're going to hear from ESPN SC Network's own Peter Burns. This was the first interview that I shot at SC Media Days. If you're listening to it on audio, it'll be fine. If you're watching on video, it looks like I shot it with a potato. So just emotionally get ready for that. But before we jump into that, Charlie 5, how can people find you, hear you, all that good stuff?
Absolutely. Find me on Twitter, _Charlie_5 in the Locked On Auburn Discord every single day, or auburnlive.com, the corner message board, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the Dad Bod Golf Pod.
Joined now by ESPN and SC Network's Peter Burns. It seems like folks are all over the place on these Auburn Tigers. Bryan Harsin, the roster itself, the quarterbacks. Where are you with all of that?
I think you got to go back just a couple of weeks ago when we were in, weeks ago, I say months ago now, that we were in SEC spring meetings at Destin. And that was the first time I got a chance to sit down and talk ball with Bryan Harsin.
Right.
And I was blown away. We didn't get a chance. We're normally over at the SEC Network studios in Charlotte, and I'm back in studio, so I don't get a chance to travel to Auburn or go to a bunch of the different games. So, when I talk to these coaches, it's through a phone or a Zoom interview. That's the first time I got a chance to talk to them on air and then kind of behind the scenes. And I'm like, where in the world does all this drama come from?
Right.
There was no way that I sat there and looked at Bryan Harsin and talked to him and be like, wait a minute, this guy you give this guy enough time and he's going to figure a bunch of blank out. And I was just, it baffled me even more so about how people weren't all in on Harsin from day one.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing. As soon as he was hired from Boise, everyone's like, okay, this is going to be a build. It's going to take him time to kind of get things the way that he wants to.
Yeah.
And then a year later, the goalpost moved.
Yeah. And I mean, the question is, did it ever really, was it ever really like a stagnant goalpost, right? Was it ever a fixed location? And that's not just unfair to Auburn, but a lot of different college football programs. And again, there's always cooks in the kitchen about hey, I donated this amount of money, I want to make this decision.
Right.
And I think when that decision was not the one that maybe some people wanted, all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, I don't like this guy for whatever reason, rather than giving him amount of time. But listen, I mean, I really like everything that he talks about and brings to the table. And I think that message has been delivered, that the outside noise doesn't mean what to this program. And if I'm an Auburn Tiger fan and I'm cool with giving him a little time, I'm thinking I got the right guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think?
He's got the coordinator now that he
does. It seems like it was the guys that he originally wanted almost.
Yeah, and that's hard. So how do you take this incredible job in the hardest division of college football? And then listen, and Mason was incredible, and we got along really well. But you're going to say, I had this success. Who do you really want to have? And now that you're able to say, all right, now that I kind of won this little coup that almost happened, and I lived to fight another day. Who do you want to be in the trenches with? And he's able to say, I want this person, I want that person. Yeah. Then all of a sudden you're starting from year zero. And that's why there hasn't been a lot of noise. And when I talk to people down in the Auburn football facility, they tell me they kind of laugh at all the ancillary stuff that's going on when people talk about their program, because they're like, okay, whatever. That's not what's going on with this crew. Yeah.
And you talk to players, and we'll hear from three really good ones on Thursday when it's Auburn's turn to go. And it's just they seem dialed in. They seem focused.
Yeah.
And so,
but they're also getting put in the toughest division in college football, and in the SEC West is a murderer's row. I mean, right. I was over at dinner last night with Cole Kublik and a bunch of people, and we were having all this conversation of right now, assume that it's Alabama in the West and Georgia in the East. Give me the second best team or the third best team in the conference. We had 7 different answers.
It's tough.
I mean, and that goes to show you the parity level of this conference right now is out of control. And what it comes down to is, can you have a quarterback take the next step? And now, Calzada, now that, he wasn't 100% in spring camp, should be 100% ready to roll in the fall, and battling against, TJ. If one of those guys can hit it to that next level, then all of a sudden you're going to be painting everybody's, what?
Right. No, there's no question about it. I mean, it seems like it's a quarterback away. I mean, there's a lot of question marks about the offense as a whole and receivers and all that, but the talent is there. It just seems like it's going to come down to whether I think it's going to be Zach Calzada. I'd actually be surprised if it wasn't, but it's can he take that next step? Can he help this offense take that next step from where it was a year ago?
Can he do what, Auburn has done in years past, which is beat Alabama? I mean, he did it just for a different team.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the question. I mean, that moment that he had, I can't imagine the amount of confidence that had to give Calzada. That's why, frankly, we were all floored when he decided that he was going to be transferring out, because we're like, wait a minute, you just had one of the greatest wins in Texas A&M football history, right, and now you're saying deuces. And, I mean, you're the guy right now, and so that made me think, all right, so he's got some belief in himself of what they can do. But I still think when it comes down to it, I think this is a defensive-minded team. I think there's probably more talent on that aspect of it.
Right.
It's just you can't put yourself in a bad situation, which Bo Nix did to a certain extent sometimes. But then,
sure,
hell, he also had games in which LSU still hasn't tackled him.
Oh, yeah, it was a roller coaster. Bo Nix, the most polarizing player in Auburn football history, and probably the biggest question mark. But now you mentioned the SEC West and how tough it is. And you have that SEC West slate. Oh, yeah. Then you also got to play Penn State again for the second year in a row. What are reasonable expectations in your mind for this team?
I mean, 8-4, I think is a reasonable expectation. And,
wow.
and what's
that's higher than what most people are saying.
Because I think he's that good. And I think that there's a certain amount of people aren't giving this team enough credit. Wow. And then, the idea that what Jordan Hare is going to sound like when the Nittany Lions come into town, like that should mean something, you know? And again, I think that's one of the things that was really disappointing last year in this off season is that there was just such a vocal minority that was like, Harsin's not our guy. And I'm like, what, was there something that I don't understand about this? Again, it's frustrating sometimes because I feel sometimes that Auburn fans can't get out of their own way. But every smart Auburn fan that I've talked to lately understands. They're like, dude, we got a guy. Give him some time. If Calzada hits and this defense is right, then why not and build upon it?
Yeah, and it's all about those first 5 games, right? I mean, you get Penn State at home.
You can be 4-1, 5-0 if things go right.
I mean, if Auburn starts 5-0, I mean, you're talking about they go into Athens. I don't think they win in Athens, right, but they're probably a top 15 team. You got a really quality win against Penn State and LSU at that point, and you get hope, you get confidence, and then I think the road trip to Oxford is significantly more reasonable. I think
Ole Miss takes a step back this year.
I do too. Mississippi State, that one's tricky. A lot of Auburn fans are still kind of scarred from blowing that 28-3 lead. Arkansas at home, I think it's extremely winnable. I think they take a step back this year. So all of a sudden, if you can go 4-1 or 5-0, I mean, it really opens up.
Well, but it also puts yourself in a situation that A&M and Kevin Sumlin had to deal with a long time ago, which was they would race out to these 4-0 and 5-0 starts that were fantastic, and then all of a sudden, all right, they would fall apart, and then all the boosters would get highly upset about it. So, I mean, again,
which is kind of what happened last year. I mean, Auburn was solid until that A&M game.
And I think there's been such an unfair injustice to Auburn football having to play Georgia and being in the SEC West every single year. And so it cannot go down quick enough to where they change how they do the divisions and the scheduling to make sure that it's just a more equal schedule for all SEC squads.
Have you been a little surprised by how long it's taken to kind of get the future plan of scheduling in the conference?
No, because you're still trying to figure out how many teams are going to be in it, right? Like when's Texas and Oklahoma going to join the conference? So I think there's a lot of those discussions. I thought they would go to 9, but then, conference games. And then I hear some of the rationale behind 8, and it makes sense as well. They
both make sense, yeah.
I mean, Sankey talked about it earlier today about how 10 games like we did in the pandemic makes sense. So, I mean, again, all I know is that when it comes down to it, the SEC West is going to end up feeling like an NFL division to where there's so much amount of talent. And I think Auburn's going to be one of those squads.
Brother, thank you for stopping by for a few minutes. I really appreciate it.
Always, man. See ya.
Thank you so much to Peter Burns. Thank you so much to Charlie 5, Auburn message board legend, joining us on the show today. As Charlie 5 mentioned earlier in the show, join the Locked On Auburn Discord. I think we're 14 members away from having 1,000 Auburn fans in there, constantly chit-chatting about everything going on in Auburn sports. And this weekend is going to be a good weekend to get in there with Big Cat Weekend. Rumors are going to be all over the place. So be sure to join us there and check it out. It's in the episode description down below. And you can find all of my written work at auburndaily.com. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Auburn.